Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Gary Allen. I'll introduce myself a little bit more in a minute, but welcome to your law firm's financial report card. So we talk about whether you're a best-in-class financial firm, in the pack, or in the back. And this is part of a webinar series that my company LeanLaw is sponsoring for the Association of Legal Administrators. We've invited both ALA. We've invited both ALA members and non-members, so we've got a mix there. But we really value ALA as a partner, and I'd like to start what we're doing today. Whoopsie, I got to go back. With a little introduction of ALA. Our sponsoring chapter today is the Idaho chapter, which happens to be LeanLaw's home chapter. And I'd like to introduce Angie Huff, with Parsons, Bailey, and Latimer, who is the Idaho and chapter president, I believe also with the international chapter of ALA, just to talk a little bit about ALA and the benefits of membership in ALA. Before she starts, I want to just say that this webinar is pre-approved for CLM application credit for financial management and also recertification credit. So Angie, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having us today. I've been a member of the Association of Legal Administrators since 2015. And as you mentioned, I'm currently the president of the Gem State chapter in Idaho. ALA internationally is made up of almost 9,000 members, and it's mainly in the United States, but there is a presence internationally as well. Their mission statement is to be the catalyst for growth by providing diverse educational experiences, engaged peer communities, strategic solutions, dynamic resources, and trusted networks. And ALA has really developed robust resources, including webinars, in-person conferences, which I can attest to are the most fun conferences out there. And they have a great online community where you can ask questions of your peers and exchange ideas. For firms that are smaller who may not have the resources to dedicate to specific issues and hot topics right now, they offer a great DEIA resource hub and a mental health resource hub, which are very, very useful. And ALA's got an extensive vetting process for their business partners that want to reach out to ALA members, which I truly appreciate, because then I know that the business partners are one step above the normal fray. And LeanLaw is a great example of being a valued business partner for ALA. Thank you. At the end of the day, most legal administrators are kind of islands in their own firm. And whether you're specialized in one portion of your firm's administration, like finance or HR, or if you're wearing all the hats, like as a small firm administrator, ALA can give you the opportunity to meet with other administrators and create a community of support and synergy. Feel free to check out ALA for yourself, and we would love to have you. Thanks, Gary.
All right. Thank you, Angie. I really appreciate that. So if there's anybody on the line who is interested in learning more about ALA membership, just type ALA in the chat and we'll have Angie or someone from your area, your local chapter, get in touch with you. So thanks so much, Angie. And again, we really love ALA as a partner, and it's a great organization. I will say the in-person conferences are really fantastic, having been to a few now. So let's get on with the webinar. So today's webinar really comes out of my experience as a 35-year practicing lawyer. I recently retired, but I practiced for 30 years in a really excellent law firm. But early on in my career, I had a lot of pain from poor business practices in firms that I worked in. When I was 2 years out of law school, I had a firm implode underneath me. Fortunate to land on my feet after that one. A few years later, I was in another branch office of a regional firm that closed suddenly, and I was left on a Saturday afternoon with no job and a 6-month-old baby. As I mentioned, I was fortunate to land in a really excellent firm from a financial standpoint, and that really changed everything for me. I mean, not only did I make a lot more money working in that firm, but I was just much happier. And a lot of the, frankly, BS that I had been experiencing in the prior firm just disappeared the way I went there. And I've kind of distilled down some of the things they do into things that we'll talk about today. And it's really given me a passion to help make law firms into better businesses. Now, along the way, I founded LeanLaw, which is a legal billing software company, which is, as you'll, if you stick with these things, you'll see we couch it as part of the solution, but not everything that you need to do to become a great firm. So let's dive into this. So our objectives today, when we're done, you're going to have a really good overview of what I call the 3 secrets of best-in-class mid-sized financial performance. We're going to focus on 5 key financial metrics that separate best-in-class financial performers from average performers. And as a bonus, we're going to quickly walk through the type of strategies that can help you to improve performance. And you kind of see where maybe your firm should be focusing in that respect. So let's look at those 3 secrets. I always hesitate to use a word like that because it's marketing speak, but they must be secrets because a lot of firms aren't using them. So let's get them out in the open and get people using these best practices. So the 3 secrets are the right people, the right products and services. I would have just used services, but I wanted a P word on that one, and then the right processes. And so when we think about people, it always starts with culture. You need to have people who are accountable and are, self-motivated and are going to do the work that you need without having to be heavily managed. And there's a lot more to be said about that. You'll see there's a bunch of follow-up webinars we're going to do that dive into these. But if you're having problems in the financial side of your firm, look first to your culture. Secondly is compensation. And if you've been on any of my webinars, you know I'm a big proponent of an objective production-based compensation system. And that just because it's self-executing. If people perform well, they're compensated for it. If they're performing poorly and you can't get them to where they're compensated in that way as well. If they really can't be made to perform well, then they tend to self-select, again, making your job easier as a manager. And then succession, I think, is super important. And a lot of things that one of the things law firm founders don't think about particularly enough, that a lot of founders just say, the firm will just go until I retire. It's got my name on it. And then, it's not my problem what happens with it after that. And there are 2 reasons to think otherwise there. One is, who's going to stick with you during the course of your practice if they think the firm is just going to retire when you retire? And secondly, they're certainly not going to pay you anything for the firm that you have built if you let it go and don't think about what happens next. So I'm a big proponent of what I would call an evergreen firm. It just creates a lot more value. Let's talk about products and services for just a second. And again, we're just introducing these things today. There's much more to be said about them. Every lawyer should have a defined offering. If you're just offering legal services, that's totally commoditized. You're not going to be very good at it. And, you're not going to be able to charge what you want. You'll have more disputes with clients, et cetera. So hone in on defining what you really do well, do more of that, set the other aside, and make sure that you're really offering what you do best in the marketplace. And lawyers tend to think in terms of their substantive expertise. Think also about what really makes you special as a lawyer, and which it may be your problem solving abilities, your ability to argue on your feet, and market that, because you're going to get the clients who really want that. And then finally, the right secondly, the right pricing related to those services. Again, if you're undifferentiated, you're only going to be able to charge an undifferentiated rate or an undifferentiated fixed fee. Try to find those places where you can, where you don't have a lot of competition, where you're specialized enough that you provide something special to the marketplace and price accordingly. And I've heard, many of you may have heard the story of the consultant or lawyer who wanted to retire. So he said, well, I'll just raise my rate to $1,000 an hour or $2,000 an hour, which these days are actually real rates for some people. And instead of finding that no one will buy their services, there's more demand for their services. So, be courageous in setting your pricing. Finally, I call this pinpoint marketing, and I'll only go into it this far, is to say you need to understand who your clients are and how they choose lawyers. For B2B, business-to-business firms, that tends to be by referrals, word of mouth, that sort of thing. So you have to do good referral marketing and networking. If you're spending money on SEO and Google ads, you're wasting your time and money in that type of practice. On the other hand, if you're business to consumer, B2C, you need to understand those digital strategies, and probably need some help to implement those. It's easy to burn piles of money on those types of strategies, so choose your help carefully. So that's the right products and services. The final secret is the right processes. And that is, one is just to keep a lean overhead load. It's really easy to have an inefficient overhead allocation. We'll talk more about that later. And we'll talk about and figure out how can you control your overhead load so it's significantly lower than an average firm. And we'll have whole sessions about how to do that. And then technology. It's not to be obsessed with technology, but to find the technology that really produces greater efficiencies. And you'll be able to see whether it's doing that or not if you've got a close eye on your overhead load. And what all of these add up to is a strategy to keep it super simple in your firm. And you don't want a complex management system. You don't want a lot of complex metrics that you've got to keep track of that nobody really quite knows what they mean. You need a few metrics. We'll talk about some today, which I think are pretty fundamental for a law firm. But find these type of self-executing strategies so people can manage themselves and focus on practicing law, because that's, all of you know, that's really what lawyers want to do, is practice law, figure out a way to make it as easy and simple for them to do that as possible. All right, so that's kind of the backdrop of what we're going to talk about for the rest of the hour. But if you want more information about these other topics, we're going to have an ALA series webinar every month, typically on the second Wednesday of the month after the summer. And so you'll be able to pick up information on every one of these topics that I just mentioned. So there's more coming. There may be webinars also that are not in this series. So stay tuned. We can help fill in the gaps for you. And if you want to consult, just to kind of cut to the bones of it, I'm happy, just reach out to me at gary.allen@LeanLaw, and I'd be happy to spend a few minutes with you. All right, so now let's turn to how law firms make money. And unfortunately, this is also very simple. That is simply revenue minus overhead equals profit. And that works for firms, and it also works for offices, and it works for individual lawyers. And there are 5 elements of that profit. These are the 5 metrics that we're talking about. One is capacity. The second is utilization. The third is realization. The fourth is collection. And the fifth is overhead as a percentage of revenue. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm going to try to get through this presentation without interruption. But then I've saved time at the end for your questions. And if we don't get to all of your questions, we'll make sure that we get with you afterwards, and every question will be answered. Okay, so let's look at the first one of those, which is capacity. And so the best definition I found for capacity is the capacity of a firm, or we're going to say a lawyer in this case, in dollars to sell services into the market. And so that typically begins with the total amount of hours worked. The average lawyer in the US works 50 hours a week. So with a little vacation and holiday, that's about 2,400 hours. Let's say the non-billable time is 800 hours. That leaves you a worked minus non-billable capacity, 1,600 hours. The average rate for a lawyer in the US, $300 an hour. So you've got a capacity to produce $480,000 in paid services in the course of a year. All right, so I'm going to pull up our first poll and just say, okay, so that was my little calculation on capacity. Let's look at what your firm's is. So I just put up that poll. So is it less than 300,000, 300 to 500, or more than 500? So all right, we're starting to get some answers here. Let's see, how many people do we have on? We have 28 right now. Okay, we'll just give you a few more seconds here. About half of you have responded. All right, interesting. So we've got, it's really close between the 4 answers. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. And I'll share the results out. So we had 4 out of 20% at less than 300,000, 25% at 300 to 500, 25% at more than 500, and then several of you don't know. So I'm just going to share those results. And I think I can just leave that there without creating any mess. All right, so that's interesting. So all over the board as far as capacity goes. Well, so how do you increase your capacity? One way is to reduce the non-billable time. So, I'm not a fan of saying, let's increase the total hours worked. So you work 60 hours a week. I think 50 is a really good place to draw a line and say, I don't want to work any more than that. So if you don't do that, you can, let's say you reduce the non-billable time to 600 hours, which, depending on your role, may be quite doable. And that increases your non-billable your billable capacity to 1,800 hours. Now you're at $540,000. So, you just picked up $60,000 a year by reducing an administrative workload. Another way to increase capacity is to increase rates. So if now you've got 1,800 hours and you can go to $400 an hour because you've increased your specialization. Now you're looking at over $700,000 a year in capacity. So you can get some pretty big numbers here by focusing on those things. Some fairly simple changes there. So that's something to think about as you think about how you can improve your financial performance. So when I think about capacity, it's important. It seems a little bit like you're plucking numbers out of the air, but this is where you set boundaries and where you set goals. Like I say, I think it's good to set a boundary at 50 hours a week, or maybe even 30 or 40 hours a week, depending on what your goals are. But then track those hours and goals like you mean it. So your total hours, again, that's kind of where you save time for your life, is by setting a limit on what you want to work over time. Non-billable goals, also important to see, what am I spending my time on that I'm not getting paid for, and is that of real value? And then, of course, your billable hours and rates, also very important, and you can see they've got a big impact here, and we'll see there's even more potential impact. Really, what you've got is there's an important planning function here, and if you fail to do that, then you're likely to fail and miss perhaps the most important opportunity to improve your overall financial performance. Okay, let's turn to utilization. So the utilization rate, and I'm going to say these terms are not uniformly used through the industry. Some people use utilization for how much of your time is billed. I think utilization, and the better definition, is that it's the percentage of your capacity that you actually worked. So this is time worked on billable matters. A little rabbit hole here, so is this the percentage of your total capacity relative to your hours, all hours worked, or just of the billable capacity? And that doesn't really matter, except that you want to be talking apples to apples. So if we're talking about total capacity, 70% is a pretty good, an average of that for your people in your firm is good. It's going to vary based on what the role is, right? If you're the managing partner, you're probably not going to hit 70%. But if you're just an associate, hitting 70, and you don't have a lot of administrative functions and probably aren't, marketing all that much yet, 60, you might be able to hit 80%. Managing partner might be 60%, even 50% or less, depending on what the role is. If we're talking billable capacity, you really want to be at 95 to 100%. If you say it's 1,800 hours, and I'm not saying that's a good number or a bad number, that's what you want to hit. And if you're not hitting that, think about what's happening and what you can do to actually be better at predicting what you can produce. As I mentioned, I don't think excess hours should be encouraged. Even though that may mean more short-term profits, I think it creates sustainability problems that are not great for most people. Now, what blew me away as I was researching this, I've been thinking about these issues, is that the national average utilization of total capacity for mid-sized firms, according to Clio, and they do a nice study on this, is 45 to 47%. So my jaw dropped when I saw that. And for small firms, it's even worse. It's more like 35%. So that's not a world that I've lived in, so I don't know what it's like to have that much unused capacity in the firm, except that you should try to change that. All right, so that's utilization. So let's do the next poll, which is going to ask what your utilization rate is. Let's see. Now go back to my list and do utilization and launch that poll. Okay, so we've got less than 45%, 45 to 70%, 70% or more, and then I don't know. Okay, starting to come in. Looks like a fair number of people don't know this number, which is not too surprising. But I think it is, as we'll see, I think it's a very telling metric and one you should think about trying to track. Okay, we've got most people have participated here. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So we had only one less than 45%. So good on you for that. Quite a few at 45 to 70, 23% at 70 or more, and then half of you don't know this number. So I would suggest a little bit of homework in that respect. So I'm going to stop sharing this one. You probably don't need to keep seeing those. Okay, so that's utilization. So we have capacity and utilization. Now we look at realization. So this is how much of that work that was done there is billed to a client after discounts or canceled fees. And the national average realization rate for mid-sized firms is 82%, according to Clio. And best-in-class performer has a realization rate of 95% or more. So let's see how you guys do on that front. So let's ask you to fill in your realization rate. So we've got below 80, 80 to 90, above 90, and again, I don't know. And I know some of you are not law firms, so sorry I don't have a poll for you on this, but so those consultants out there are hopefully interesting to see what the data is at least. We've got some pretty good ones here. Okay, that looks like most everybody has responded. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So we had just 5% below 80%. Good job. 80 to 90, we've got 20%, above 90 at 25%, and then 50% don't know this number. Hopefully there's some other number you're using that would substitute for this. Again, if you don't know, maybe some good homework. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that one. And now we're going to talk about collection. So this is how much of that invoiced work gets paid to the firm. So the national average in 2022, based on the Clio study, is 89%. And again, I think 95% is a good goal for a best-in-class firm. That was my firm was able to accomplish that and more on a regular basis. So now I'm going to go to collection and launch the poll. So we've got choices below 80, 80 to 90, above 90, and I don't know again. All right, you guys are dialed in. I like it. You're getting your polls done quickly. Okay, we're dropping off just a bit here. All right, those of you who are looking at your phones, there's still one or two can fill out the poll. Okay, that looks like what we're going to get. I'm going to end the poll there and share the results. So we had none of you below 80%. So that's a good sign. 80 to 90%, we had 26%. Above 90, we had 53%. And then 4 of you don't know this number. So again, definitely homework if you don't know this one. You should definitely know that. So stop sharing. And here we go. Wait, sorry, I've already done that one. So now we're going to talk about overhead as a percentage of revenue. So this is, and many of you may not know exactly what this number is, but this is the expense per lawyer, not including distributions to producers. So what you pay your lawyers, your partners, your associates, your paralegals is not included in this. This is just more of those overhead expenses, not the direct expense of creating the revenue. The average overhead per lawyer is 45 to 50% around the country, according to Law Crossing. Best-in-class firm has overhead of 30% or less. So let's see how you guys did here. All right, so we've got 50% or more, 30 to 50, less than 30. I don't know, and I'm letting you jump in on my questions, critique me on my questions. All right, almost done. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll there and share the results. Go on this. And so we had nobody at 50%, or let's see, we had 1 at 50% or more, 22% at 30 to 50, 17% at less than 30, quite a lot, 50% didn't know. And one person wants me to stop asking questions. I'm almost done. So I'm going to stop sharing that one, and we'll move on to the next things here. So, all right, so we know all of those numbers. Does any of that really matter to your firm? And so I want to walk you through an exercise to see what a difference financial performance makes in a law firm. So we're going to compare 2 lawyers. They are identical lawyers in different firms. So one of them is average on those key metrics we just saw. The other firm is best in class. So what's the difference? All right, so we're going to start with capacity. We had 2,400 total hours, 1,800 billable hours at average 300 an hour. So we're going to say the lawyers are exactly the same in their capacity. So that's 500 and, whoops. Well, it should have been a little higher. Now. Yeah, that's right. $540,000 each for their capacity. Now with a utilization rate, if we take the average rate of 45%, which this Clio study shows, versus that 70%, and we now have billable time of 324,000 versus over 500,000 in the best-in-class firm. Now we go to realization. So we start with those billable time numbers, 82% realization rate versus 95. We're now at 265 versus 478. Collection, we start with the 265, 478. Average collection rate at 89%, best in class 95%. Each goes down a little bit, but this is relatively small part of the equation. Now we take out the overhead. So we had 236,000 versus 450. 50% comes out of the average, giving you 118 for the average profit before distributions for those for the lawyers, 30% here, gives you 318,000. So what does that all add up to? So when you, obviously now we've got profit per lawyer per year, that average firm at 118, the best in class at 318, that's $200,000 a year that you're leaving on the table by having less than optimal financial performance. And over the course of a 40-year career, it's $8 million. And, you know, I just don't know a lot of lawyers who can afford to leave that much money on the table, particularly when it's almost triple the difference. So, you know, I wanted to illustrate just what a big deal this financial performance is. Now, remember, these lawyers were identical in terms of, you know, their ability to practice law and their capacity to produce billable hours. So I wanted to just give you another way to look at this. So these are other terms to, you know, talk about what we just talked about. So here, unused capacity, that's the utilization. So you have $200,000 a year in unused capacity for an average lawyer, a relatively small amount in best in class. Then you have the time written down, that's the realization. And that's, you know, that's an issue, but not nearly as big. Uncollected, that's the collection rate. Pretty close, actually, between these firms. And then overhead, you know, the average firm actually has lower overhead than the best-in-class firm, but notice how out of proportion that is. You know, that you know, somebody who's taken home 320,000 probably isn't going to worry much about overhead, but it's a big burden on this lawyer, and you know, you're not producing nearly as much for the amount of production costs that you're putting in place. So that leaves you with these profit numbers. So it's, you know, I think what I wanted to really point out here is, okay, now we think about what are you going to do about this over here? It becomes pretty stark that, like, filling up the capacity is really, you know, that's number one priority. How do you get people doing more productive work? The other second priority is overhead, and how do you make that more proportional to the revenue stream that you've got going? And then you've got some opportunities on realization and collection, but you know, those should probably not be your focus, frankly. All right, so we jumped through a lot there, but now I wanted to come back to kind of the final question, which is your firm's profitability, just to get a sense of where you are there. I'm going to launch this. So the question is, are you best in class? Are you in the pack, in the back, or you don't know? So let's see how everybody comes here, what everybody comes to here. All right, we have a few firms dropping off a little bit as we go through, but there's 16, 17. See if give you another second for the last couple. All right, I'm going to end the poll there. So we have 2 best-in-class firms. So congratulations to you all. We have over half sort of in the pack, and a couple trailers, and then several that don't know. So I think that's. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to share those results. So there you can see that. So I think we got kind of a normal distribution there, but hopefully that is eye-opening for many of you, that you can, you know, about opportunities to improve this. So I'll stop sharing that, and then let's see where we go from here. So just one point I wanted to make is, so what's the difference here? So this is a firm that, a fictional firm where the producers are exactly the same. They are, the ability to produce, so the quality, all of that is the same, but it's the leadership and the management of the firm are the difference. As I mentioned earlier, and as I'm sure you know, lawyers want to practice law. They want to add to the top line. But it's the leaders and managers of the firm that, whether you're intentional about it or not, you're creating that bottom line, whether it's average or it's top of the line, best in class. So, think about that as just a terrific opportunity to show, the value of your leadership and what you do for a firm. It's can add just tremendous value to everybody. And as I said earlier, it's not just about making more money. It's about having a better life and, having less unproductive stuff that you do, because you work hard as a lawyer, and having, a large unproductive layer on top of that can feel quite burdensome. So there's your opportunity. And I guess I got a little ahead of myself, but the difference matters. You have more freedom, you have a happier practice, you have a very different retirement as a lawyer if you are able to perform in a best-in-class firm. For the managers, I would think it's much more satisfying. You're going to have a better work environment because the lawyers are happier around you, and a very different understanding of the value that you can bring as a manager. That if you can change everybody's bottom line by $200,000 a year, that's a very valuable position and skill that you're bringing to your law firm. So we have one other way of showing all of this, which is a law firm report card, which is part of what you'll receive at what you'll be able to download at the end of the webinar, or when we send you the landing page for the webinar. So you can, sort of see where you stand relative to these metrics and see where you need to focus in improving your firm. All right, so we have a few minutes, about 1:45, to talk about strategies. So, what can you do to improve your firm now? And I'm going to hit all these at a really high level. Obviously, there's much more to talk about, which is what the other webinars are for. And but let's see what can be done. So for capacity, enhancing specialization is something that worked really well for me. I mean, I invented and reinvented myself several times as a lawyer and was able to build and rebuild million-dollar practices. And specialization was a lot of the strategy there. Find those non-competitive niches and ways to raise your rates. The second thing is to delegate work to free partner time to make rain. Now, there are a lot of lawyers who value control and feel like they can't let go of work. But I want to commend a book to your reading, which is called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And it's a business book. It's not a law book, but it has a really good insight, which is, there's 20% of your work which gives you most of the joy in your practice and creates the highest value, or you just blow it out of the water and, clients super happy, you've created tremendous value. Well, do that. Figure out how you can do that all day long. And then you have to take a big leap and get rid of all the rest of your work. So, it's a radical idea. Get rid of 80% of your work. And that can be, you might fire some clients, but more likely you're going to be delegating either administrative work or lesser billable work to someone else. And then your practice can blossom and explode if you do that. Exploring alternative pricing for subscriptions and fixed fees if you're in that type of practice. If you can produce something of greater value than it takes time to create, in immigration practice, IP, etc., then by all means go in that direction. I was always terrible at this kind of thing. That fixed fee was another word for discount. But I think there are others of you who are much better at that routine work than I ever was. Enhancing your production automation. There's, if you can, again, produce something of higher value and by automating it, like, contract reviews and things like that, if that's central to your practice. And then finally, figure out ways to reduce that producer time spent on non-billable work, which starts with knowing what that non-billable time is, and how do you get that off of somebody's plate. Okay, that's capacity strategies. Utilization strategies. We use a management system here at LeanLaw called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And one of the main things that they ask is, do you have the right people in the right seats? And so if you have people who are just not using their capacity and you have to beat on them to get work done and to bill time, you have to ask yourself if they belong in a private practice firm, and are they ever going to produce in the way that you need. And you're not doing anybody a favor by hanging on to a lawyer, paralegal like that. And they should find something that's more suited to them in, government work or in-house or something else, and get somebody who's going to be excited about the work that they're doing in private practice. The next utilization strategy is just to understand if you really have the right incentives for people to work or to make rain or otherwise produce what you want to produce. This is why I'm such a big fan of a production-based system. Some people call it eat what you kill. If it's coupled with a compassionate culture, it's not as brutal as that name might suggest, and it allows people a lot of flexibility to work the way that they want to work. But somehow you've got to create those incentives so you're not having to set arbitrary deadline or numbers for people, and work hard to make others work hard. A third strategy is to improve your marketing strategy and execution. For many lawyers, this is referral-based marketing, but it might be, as we discussed briefly, a better SEO strategy and execution. You got to, have the clients in order to do the work, and this is one place to look. Then finally, the sort of worst option is, do you have excess capacity? Do you need to outsource some of that work, or can you get people to self-select and leave your firm so that you're not don't have a lot of unused capacity, or do you need to actually downsize and move somebody along so they can find something that's a better fit for them? Quickly, realization strategies. We've got about 10 minutes left. So one reason you might not be able to bill the time that you've put in is that you're not financially aligned with your clients. So, did you need to do a better assessment of the client before you accepted the matter? I'm sure you've heard the old saying that the best client your best client is the one that you never took. So, turning down the right clients is obviously an important strategy. And then did you need to do a better job of budgeting? And I was an awful budgeter, and I think that some things are really hard to budget, like litigation. But there's I think it can be an area of focus where you can gain alignment with your client on what's happening and what things can go wrong, how things can be different, so that if there's a surprise, then you're in alignment with your client about how to handle that. The other realization strategy is to address times where the work was inefficient. So that's often a training issue, or again, do you have the right people in the right seats? And if you grow lawyers from day one in their practice, you're going to get quite a bit of inefficiency in the first year or two, and that's just part of a natural growth and apprenticeship. It really shouldn't be considered a knock on anybody. But after that, if you're seeing a lot of poor realization, you have to wonder if that person is right for the work that they're doing. Okay, and collection strategies. So these fall into two categories. One, the client can't pay. So I think law firms are generally pretty poor at doing credit checks and really understanding their client's ability to pay up front. You can also require retainers. We have some firms in the LeanLaw world who do really well at this and essentially eliminated any issue of collection. Creating pre-authorized payment methods. There are definitely ways of addressing this if this is a significant problem for your firm. If you are doing retainers, then you've got to have some sophisticated trust accounting software, or you're going to have a big administrative burden dealing with your trust account. And the other part of this is that your client won't pay, which again takes you back to improving your financial alignment or requiring those retainers. And then overhead strategies tend to fall into two categories, either people. So do you need better technology adoption by your lawyers? That's often why overhead is too high, is that lawyers are delegating things where it's not really efficient. And secondly, you can kind of do a forcing function where you say, all right, we're just going to hire fewer staff. So people have to learn how to deal with that. And this is, and that kind of forces you to improve processes. On the process side, improving your technology stack to improve adoption or automation. Again, keep it simple on this front is our recommendation. We have much more to say about that on another day. And then just identify those most manual and unproductive processes you've got, and then focus on those and start knocking them off one at a time. Don't try to do too many things at once when it comes to technology, but you can if you keep it focused, you can get things done that way. All right, so we've got about 5 minutes for questions. So I see a couple of them in the Q&A. Allison, can you read me those questions?
Yes. Okay. So the first one, for the overhead calculation, do you include regular salaries to owners as part of your distribution to owners calculation?
The answer is no. So any compensation paid to the producer should not be included in overhead in the way that we're calculating it here. So you're just calculating, the non-production expenses essentially. Now you can do it the other way, but it's a different calculation at that point.
Great. Okay, so we have another one. Will there be a recording of this seminar? I'd like to reference that again in the future.
Oh. Absolutely. The answer is yes. We'll talk about that in just one second. Okay. All right, so are there any other questions? Looks like we'll be able to stop just a minute or two earlier. So we're going to send you an email, which is linking you to more resources. So the slides and the recording. There'll be an evaluation, which is something we need to do for ALA. So we'd appreciate your filling that out. The law firm financial report card. We also have a compensation calculator, so you can look at some of these objective calculation methods. And then we're going to create a free open community where there'll be much more, like all the webinar recordings from the series, case studies, white papers, all sorts of things about creating a best-in-class firm. So we hope we'll take advantage of that when it's available. And we also, in the slide deck, have the sites to some of these overhead calculations and so on. All right, everyone, thank you so much. We really appreciate your coming today, and we are adjourned. Thank you for coming.